Welcome to Just Have a Drink. Today, I'll show you how to make a cocktail. It's not just as simple as pouring some liquids into a glass and calling it a day. It's a combination of art and science. It's a lot like cooking. You can't just throw some ingredients into a pot and expect a masterpiece without knowing some of the basics. If you're a home bartender or you can't get that drink to taste exactly how it did at the bar, or maybe you're a seasoned vet and you would like a refresher course, I'm sure you'll find something here informative. So let's jump into it. What is a cocktail? It's spirit, sugar, water, bitters, or sour. This is important to know to create a balanced cocktail. All spirits have ethanol, that alcohol burning sensation you get down there. In order to cut that down and get to the delicious flavors of the spirit, you add water, sugar, bitters, or sour in order to balance that out and create harmony in the glass. It's similar to cooking. Any great chef will tell you that the most dynamic and delicious dishes result in a combination of taste. If your chili tastes flat, add salt to draw out the flavors and throw in some spice to kick up the intensity. The same thing applies to making cocktails. We take a spirit like bourbon or rum, add a little bit of sugar and something bitter or something sour, and a bit of water in the form of dilution, and we have a cocktail. Each of these four parts of the cocktail is important, and there are a variety of each to mix and match to make different cocktails. There are 6 main types of base spirits that you'll see: whiskey, agave, rum, gin, and vodka. Here's an extremely brief overview of them, but if you want, I'll give a deeper dive on other videos. Just let me know in the comments. Gin is probably my favorite spirit to make cocktails with. Easiest way to explain this, and it hurts my heart a little bit, is that it's like juniper flavored vodka, but it may also include citrus, cardamom, coriander, angelica root, plus other spices and roots to make gin complex and interesting. There's old time gin, Geneva, the well-known London dry gin, and the new contemporary style gin like the popular Hendrix with notes of cucumber. Using the right gin for the right cocktail will make an amazing cocktail. The main spirit in the agave category is tequila, but tequila is actually a subcategory of mezcal. All mezcals are made from different varieties of agave plants, and tequila specifically is made from the Blue Weber agave. Blanco tequila is the most commonly used in cocktails, but using some of the aged versions like reposado or añejo can make for some delicious cocktails at certain times. I don't really suggest using extra añejo, but you can if you feel like ponying up the cash. Weird cocktail nerd fact: I believe mezcal and tequila are the only spirits that has to harvest the whole entire plant to create the spirit. Rum is the Wild West of spirits. There's only one rule for this spirit, and that is that it has to be made from sugar canes, either the juice or the byproduct of molasses. There's subtle Spanish-style rums, funky Jamaican rums, grassy French rums, aged rums, molassier rums, highly overproof rums. The list goes on and on, but they are fun to experiment with and a necessity if you're making tiki cocktails. Whiskey is made from cereal grains like corn, wheat, rye, malted barley, and are usually put into oak barrels to age. While not the only contributing factor, these two processes contribute a lot to the variety of whiskey. Within whiskey, there's many different categories, and within those categories, there are even more categories. Some of the main ones are bourbon, rye, Irish, Scottish, and Japanese. And brandy. Brandy is spirits distilled from fruit juices like grapes or apples and can be aged or unaged. Another extremely large category of spirits, brandy will include cognac, applejack, and pisco. Oh yeah, vodka. I forgot about this one. Vodka is really light in flavor and often gets overshadowed when mixing other flavors into a cocktail, but it is useful if you just want to add proof into a cocktail without changing any of the flavor. There are other spirits like absinthe, which on occasion get used in cocktails like the Sazerac. There are many other spirits that vary in alcohol percentage or ABV, and they also vary in sweetness. Liqueurs, which most people might be familiar with, vary greatly in flavor and sweetness. It could have flavors of orange, chocolate, coffee, cherry. Sometimes it's herbal and very complex like chartreuse. There are bittersweet Italian liqueurs, aperitifs, and digestives like Aperol and Campari, or Amari like Averna and Fernet Branca, and you have fortified wines like sweet vermouth or dry vermouth, sherry, and ports. All that adds sweetness to a cocktail, which brings me to the second part of a cocktail: sugar. Sweetness helps round off rough edges of a drink and lessens the burn of alcohol. Simple syrup is one of the most common sweeteners. It can be 1 part sugar and 1 part water, or rich simple syrup, which is 2 parts sugar and 1 part water. But also, sugar can add flavor to a cocktail. One of my personal favorites is cane syrup and demerara syrup that I like using with aged spirits like whiskey and rum. Maple syrup is another great example. Agave nectar goes great with agave spirits, and honey syrup with floral notes goes great with gin cocktails. You can make flavored syrup from your favorite flavors, spices, and berries. You can even mix multiple flavors to make your own unique syrup. Without lime juice, a margarita wouldn't be a margarita. A whiskey sour would taste flat and like sweetened alcohol without the citrus. Vice versa, the same drinks with citrus and without sugar would be way too tart and not very enjoyable. This is why balance is key to a perfect cocktail. Bitters are like a bartender's spice rack. They can contribute and bind unexpected flavors from other ingredients together like Angostura and Peychaud's bitters, and they can also draw out flavors like orange bitters and lavender bitters. Bitters are also great to dash on top of a cocktail to give it a wonderful aroma. The fourth part of a cocktail is water, usually introduced in the form of shaking or stirring to mix a cocktail. It's important to keep in mind that dilution will also happen with any cocktail served on ice. As a general rule, cocktails that are mainly spirits like old fashions and Manhattans are stirred, while cocktails with juices in them like margaritas and daiquiris are shaken. When stirring a cocktail, you're chilling and diluting it. Stirring a cocktail will give you more control over the dilution as opposed to shaking it, and you will keep a rich, silky smooth texture. If you are stirring a cocktail to be served up, you'll stir it till it's perfectly diluted. But if you're making a cocktail on ice like an old fashioned or even pouring a Manhattan over ice, you might not want to dilute it all the way because it will slowly dilute over ice. When shaking a cocktail, you're chilling and diluting but also introducing air. This is done with most drinks with juice, dairy, and cocktails with eggs in them. Shaking cocktails with juice will give you a lighter, brighter cocktail. Really shake the crap out of the cocktail. Soft shaking won't add much air or dilution, just don't hurt yourself shaking. I like to use one large cube to get the most air and not over dilute my cocktail, but I shake hard and a little longer. You may want to throw in a small cube of ice to dilute faster if you're using a large cube. If you have crappy small ice like mini bars or the local gas station, just pack the tin with the crappy ice and shake a little shorter in order not to over dilute. For cocktails served on crush ice like mini tiki drinks, I like to do what's called a whip shake. Crush ice in a cocktail will melt faster, so I just throw in one small ice cube into my tin and shake to add a little dilution, chilling, and a lot of air. Personally, I'm not the biggest fan of garnishes unless they have a purpose besides looking pretty. My personal favorite use for garnishes is giving a cocktail a wonderful aroma. A common way to do this is to express oils out of a citrus peel or using a fragrant herb like mint. You can also use a perfume or a dasher bottle filled with bitters, tinctures, absinthe, and other aromatics. Sometimes you can use garnishes to give a visual idea of what's in a cocktail. Or like a margarita, you can have a wedge of lime to squeeze into your cocktail in case you want it a little bit more sour. Combining all this together is like the 5 kids from Captain Planet combining their rings. We can create something great. Using the example of a daiquiri, old fashioned, and a Manhattan, you can see how all this plays together to make a great cocktail. A daiquiri is a sour style cocktail that should be bright and refreshing. My personal perfect way is using 2 ounces of a high quality white rum for my spirit, 3/4 of an ounce of a 1-to-1 simple syrup for sweetness, and 1 ounce of lime juice for a sour. Since it has citrus juice and will be served up, I'll shake it to perfect dilution. To garnish, I'll add a lime wedge just in case I need a little bit more sour for perfect balance. An old fashioned is a spirit forward cocktail where the whiskey is the star of the show. In this old fashioned, I'll use 2 ounces of bourbon, something with a little proof higher than 90 to stand out in the cocktail, a 1/4 ounce of a 2-to-1 cane syrup for sweetness, a dash of orange bitters to bring out the citrus notes, and 2 dashes of Angostura bitters will bind all the flavors together. Since it's mainly spirits, I'll stir, but because I'll be serving it over ice, I'll stop short just of perfect dilution. It'll evolve from strong to a nice pop of sweet on the last drop. For every old fashioned, I like to at least garnish it with an expression of orange peel. The bright aroma of orange oil is a pleasant experience. A Manhattan is another spirit forward cocktail made and balanced in a different way. For the spirit, I'll use 2 ounces of rye whiskey. The sweetness in this cocktail comes from 1 ounce of sweet vermouth, but because the vermouth adds alcohol, we will also need a little bit more sweetness than just regular sugar like in an old fashioned. And a couple of dashes of Angostura bitters will bind all the flavors together. Another spirit forward cocktail that needs to be stirred, but because this will be served without ice, we will want to stir it till it's perfectly diluted. Many people love to toss a brandy cherry, but here I personally love to express an orange peel over the top for the garnish. To find your perfect personal balance of spirit, sweetness, and bitters or sour, you should start by adjusting the ingredients by a 1/4 of an ounce. A lot of the information here came from this book, Death & Company, Modern Classic Cocktails. It's full of much more in-depth information and great recipes. It's also one of my favorite books. I left a link down in the description. And there you have it, your crash course in how to make a cocktail. Thanks for watching, and don't forget, just have a drink.